You're listening to the Dad Whisperer podcast with Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield, the place where you, as a dad, will gain more tools for your fathering toolbox, and where moms and daughters are also invited to listen into the conversation. Now, here is your host, Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dad Whisperer podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield, and I welcome you here again today, especially if you're a dad who wants to add more tools to your fathering toolbox. You know the grid I use every week. Dad, I just want you to picture yourself standing there with other dads, getting ready to run your fathering race this week. I'm on the sidelines as your coach, cheering you on and saying, on your mark, get set, go. On your mark, topic or the theme, get set, filling that in with stories and with stats, and then go is always your practical action step so that you can put all of what you hear today into action in a concise way. Well, today I have a guest coach joining me. He's one of my favorites on the podcast. That's why I've invited him back. His name is Tony Miltenberger. If you missed our very first conversation, it's from January of 24, and it's titled, Dad, Your Greatest Gift is on the Other Side of Your Wound. I would encourage you to go back and listen to it either before this one or after it, but it will be a conversation that will give you hope in the midst of your process. And today we're going to be covering more topics on that theme that are based in his brand new book titled Wisdom in the Wound. You got to listen to the subtitle. It's awesome. How God uses your past to shape who you're becoming. Not only have I written an endorsement for this book because I so believe in it, but I literally was in tears as I was reading his book because of how it was speaking to the depths of my heart, my process in this season. Well, before we get started, I just want to tell you a little bit more about him. He's the founder of Follow to Lead. It's follow with the number 2 in between it. Follow to Lead Coaching. He hosts the Follow to Lead podcast, which is a Christian leaders podcast, where his goal is to help transform you into the leader that God wants you to be so you can follow Christ and lead boldly. I trust that's the goal of every dad listening today, which is why I know you tune in every time, right? You subscribe, you share with your friends because you want to be a leader in your home and in your life and in your marriage. And that's what we're all about supporting here on the Dad Whisperer podcast. He's also an executive coach and the associate pastor of disciple making at Centerville Grace Church in Centerville, Ohio, where he's done hundreds of hours of pastoral counseling, mentoring, marriage retreats, and executive coaching. He's also a veteran who has traveled the globe and has taken deployments in Kuwait and El Salvador. But Tony says that is more than all of that. His proudest accomplishments are being married to his high school sweetheart, Karen, for 20 years and being the father to 3 great kids, 2 sons, 1 daughter. So he's a girl dad, just like those of you listening. So with that backdrop, join me in welcoming my friend, Tony Miltenberger.
Woo! Thank you so much. It's so good to be here. Michelle, you know, I love you and I love your, all the dads listening. I just love your mission and so thankful that you and I got to meet in person a couple years ago and have stayed connected ever since.
Right? So we share similar hearts, similar passions, right? To reach hearts and homes, especially of dads.
Mm-hmm.
I know both of us counsel, coach, walk with women as well. But really, we know that the powerful role a dad plays can change lives and impact his children forever. And you're living that out day in and day out, which is why, Tony, you've got to know, I respect the man you are in your home, the father you are. And you know that's true, or I would not have had you here as my guest. So just so you know, listeners, his life backs up his lip.
I'm honored. And I honestly, the endorsement that you gave to the book and your support over the years has been so good. When I first had you on my podcast, it had a profound impact on how I parent my teenagers, my tweenagers at the time. My Princess Shiloh is kind of what we call her in the house. And so I'm forever thankful for your friendship and your guidance as one of the voices that I respect and listen to as a dad who's always trying to stay learning.
Thanks, Tony, so much. Well, today on Your Mark, we've titled this conversation, How Your Wounds Impact. No, excuse me. Let me say that again. Oh, sorry. Poor Ian. He has these things. How your wounds influence your fathering leadership. You and I have talked about this. The book is all about that. But because we all know if we're wounded physically, it limits our mobility. So, of course, our inner wounds affect every part of our life and our leadership. So, Dad, if you want to listen to this conversation to actually move the needle in your own life, you're going to love this conversation. It's part one of a two-part conversation. I'm going to have Tony back to be putting some of what we laid the foundation for today into action in terms of some steps for healing. But again, let me reinforce and repeat this incredible title, How Your Wounds Influence Your Fathering Leadership. Okay, well, Tony, we got to start here for Get Set. Let's set the foundation where I just would love to hear the backstory to the book and what really led you to write about wisdom in the wound, because you've looked at that in your own life.
Yeah, it's always an interesting idea how books are born. This wasn't the book that I had originally intended to write. I originally intended to write something called Cracks into Canyons, and it was during COVID-19, and it was March of 2020, and my wife and I were on our second walk of the day, because that's what we did during COVID. We walked all the time, and we're on our second walk of the day, and I looked over at Karen and I said, "Babe, I think I've been here before." And she was like, "Yeah, we were here this morning." And I was like, no, not like physically, like emotionally. I've been here before. I have this feeling of deja vu emotionally. And she goes, "What do you mean?" And I was like, when I was in Kuwait and Iraq, one of the crazy things that happened is that we spent an immense amount of time under prolonged stress. Now, prolonged stress is the kind of stress, and you know this, is the kind of stress that you don't really have any control over. So you don't know what's going to happen the next day. You're not exactly sure what rules are going to come down. You're not exactly sure what's going to change. And so you kind of live in this state of hypertension where it's like, something big might happen tomorrow, something not, somebody could get sick, and we've all had seasons of prolonged stress.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what I realized is prolonged stress turns cracks in our lives into canyons. And now a crack in your life is anything that you can step over, ignore. We do this on a regular basis. We oftentimes step over cracks. Like a crack may be marital strife. A crack may be parenting strife with a teenager. A crack can be just like, oh gosh, we're just not connecting. We're not doing well, but it's not enough to really move the shift. Kind of shift and move anything, right? Like you can just kind of ignore it and it'll go away.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But under prolonged stress acts as a magnifying glass, and it turns our cracks into canyons.
Uh-huh.
And you can't step over a canyon. You
Right.
can't ignore a canyon. And the truth is you could get lost in a canyon. But here's the gift, is that you can explore canyons in ways that you could never explore cracks. You can really dive deep into who you are and what's going on and why there was stress here to begin with. And I think that it was that evolution, that exploration that led to Wisdom in the Wound, because once the prolonged stress really hit and I was able to look at why I was having these emotional reactions instead of intentional responses, then everything began to shift. And that's how the book was born.
So I love that you're saying you noticed your emotional reactions. And today we're going to help dads understand more about how to identify things that are happening deeper inside and be honest about those things and not be filled with shame, but actually lean into it, be willing to admit they're there, be willing to look at those things so that things can move forward. Well, you write, I got to quote this from your book. I wrote down lots of quotes because actually I have more than I can even get to today. So when I say your book is one of the most profound books I've read on transformational leadership, I really mean that. But you say, if you happen to be a parent and you are reading this, let me assure you of something. You have wounded your kids. You didn't do it on purpose, and you didn't do it with malice, and they are most definitely wounded. Your wound is a beautiful, messy part of you. It's not something to hide in shame or dismiss as unworthy. It's shaped you in ways that no one, right, could have imagined, right? You couldn't have imagined it, but you've been shaped in ways by your wounds. So as you share your story, what would you say, Tony, that you've learned about your biggest wound? Because you open that up in the book. You lead by example, saying, here's mine and here's how I've been shaped.
Sure. This is kind of all formed out of this idea that I didn't want to be the kind of angry dad or husband that I could sometimes see in the world, right? Is that these guys have these emotional responses, hotheads, like we've seen it all before. Of course, we've seen it. And so one of the things that I began to realize is that I was having emotional reactions that were all kind of centered around similar things. And so luckily, I have a very good counselor. I've met with them for a number of years. And that counselor and I began to explore by asking the question, when is the first time that you felt this feeling? Which is a great tool. And I'm sure you use this all the time. And if you can begin to pull the string. And for me, what I began to realize is that at the age of 4 years old, my parents had unplanned twins. And so me and my older sister and I was the youngest at the time. They had unplanned twins, 4 years old, these incredible humans come into the world who I love deeply. I love them so much. I can't imagine my world without them. And also from the moment they were born on, somehow in my head, through no one's fault, I began to feel like I had the message that I didn't matter. I wasn't seen.
Yeah.
Right. And so at 4, I went from the youngest to the middle. And then at 8, my parents end up getting divorced. And then both my parents get remarried at 10 and 12. And so in my head, I created a narrative that said, I'm not worthy of being seen.
Yeah. Kind of even invisible.
Yeah.
The other kids' needs are more important than my own. So then did you end up just kind of surviving, saying, I'll take care of myself? Or what came out of that?
I think so. Yeah. It's very, it's kind of independence is one of the hallmarks, and I've got to fend for myself, and I'm not going to let anyone bully me, and just kind of pull myself up by the bootstraps, kind of classic middle child syndrome, along with the idea that hey, if I can, I'm going to put myself in positions where I matter to people. That's the other thing that I did, which makes perfect sense when you consider the roles that I play in people's lives, the job that I have, the work that I'm called to, all of that kind of goes hand in glove. And it's fascinating to me on how the Lord redeems that kind of stuff in powerful ways.
So I love how you've talked about, not only on our first podcast, but even in your book, about the gift now to being able to see into others' hearts and wounds and cracks or canyons. And yet I'd love to ask you, Tony, more specifically, because we're talking about fathering leadership. How did that wound, see me, I'm going to get out in front of you, I don't even know that I'm doing it, it's just kind of an automatic response. How has that played out in your fathering leadership?
One of the things that I have to constantly fight in my life is feeling like whatever my kids do is a direct representation of who I am. Right. And as a dad, I know that I'm a driven kind of entrepreneurship type A personality. And so I have expectations, and sometimes my expectations are not my kids' expectations, and I want them to want to do things. Right. And I tell this story in the book about my daughter, Shiloh, and hiking club. And so
I was going to ask you about this, so I'm glad you're going there.
So we had gone to South Dakota and done some hiking, and my daughter hated to hike. And the rest of my family loves to hike. And so here's my thought as a dad. My thought is, I'm going to convince her. I'm going to convince her that she loves to hike. We're going to make this so fun. So we kind of she was like, Dad, I don't want to hike. And I'm like, you do want to hike. We all love hiking. The Miltenbergers love to hike. It's what we do as a family. Come on, we could do this. And so over the summer, I was like, okay, here's the deal. We're going to go hiking 3 times a week. I get to pick the trail the first 2 times. You get to pick the trail the 3rd time. And if you do all 3 times, then you get a special treat, whether that's ice cream or something else, whatever you want. We can go get breakfast afterwards. We could go on a play date, whatever. Right. And she's like, Dad, I don't want to hike. And I'm like, no, you do want to hike. Right. And then there was this day where it was probably 100 degrees outside. It was humid. It was classic Ohio weather in July, where it's like I'm sweating and I haven't even walked out the door yet. And she's like, Dad, I don't want to go. And I'm like, come on, you do want to go. And so we get out to this field where there's no shade. I picked a horrible trail that day for the weather. And she begins to just throw the biggest temper tantrum I've seen in years.
And I think you said she was about 10 at the time.
Yeah, 100%. Right. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening? She's flipping out, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I got so angry at her.
Mm.
Like I was almost dragging her through, right? We had a whole incident with a porta potty. Like it was this whole, like, it could not have gone any worse if I could have. I can't even imagine it. And in reflection, here's what I realized. I don't know why as a dad that I was so upset that she didn't want to do hiking club when she consistently told me she didn't want to do hiking club.
Right.
Like I shouldn't be surprised. The problem is that somewhere along the way, I made hiking club about me
Mm.
and not about us, and certainly not about her.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I wanted it my way and I wanted to be seen. And I'll be honest, I was also using it to create content on social media, and people loved it. Like, and
Ah,
so there's this kind of undergird of that in there, which I didn't even get into in the book, but like it's still on my highlights. People talk about hiking club all the time. Like it was,
ah,
because it was super funny to watch this 10-year-old girl have this emotional reaction to walking. And she would say the most ridiculous things. And she still is adorable. Right. And so like, it was this moment where I took something that I had intended to bring us closer together as a family,
yeah.
and it ended up being a wedge that we still, I'm going to use the word joke about in air quotes. We still remorse about. I mean, she still doesn't love to hike. True
And how
story.
old is she now?
She's 13 now.
So you now have a full-fledged teenager where hormones are flooding. We know that, some experts in the field of psychology call it latent toddlerhood. It's
Mhm.
like that, no, mine, now, where she's finding her voice in a different way than when she was little, but that hormonal shift is a real thing.
It's
And
so
so
real.
you need different skill sets as a dad with a
Hmm.
teenager than you did earlier. So it seems like in some ways, what a powerful learning time that was with her at 10 to even prepare you for adolescence, which is a great segue. I want to quote you again here, where you say leadership isn't about position or power, it's about influence. If people are looking to you for guidance, or your little people in your home, your children are looking to you for guidance, wisdom, or direction, then you are a leader. And as a leader, the time you invest in understanding your identity is not just an investment in yourself, it's an investment in those you lead. So, dads, are you hearing Tony say, I had to get honest about my own issues, my own desires, my own agenda that I was unintentionally forcing on my daughter? But then so often I think, and I hear this in my counseling practice, is a dad will come down harder. It's more that power
Yeah.
position and saying, you're having a bad reaction. And I think what you're highlighting, Tony, is that transformational leadership, fathering leadership, is to humble yourself, listen to what your daughter and your son are saying, and partner with them in a way that honors them and it honors you. Anything else to say about that before we go to break?
I'll just say this is, even now at 13, it's a constant process of humbling myself and being
Mm,
aware of when
yeah.
it bumps up against my stuff. Because now at 13, she's less interactive than she ever has been in our family unit. She's less engaged. She's very secluded in her room. She's reading books all the time. Her
Mm,
friends are significantly more important voices in her life than we
yeah.
are. And if I can just be really honest, it hurts my feelings.
Yeah.
And here's the deal though, right? Like she's not doing it on purpose. She's not out to get me. And
Yeah.
so I need to make sure that I'm responding from a place of she's on her journey to young womanhood, and I need to just walk alongside her and kind of know that, like, and my wife and I, we have these conversations all the time. She's not out to get us. She's not out to get us. She's not out to get us. And it's such an important reminder of, like, man, my agenda is not her agenda. What am I
Yeah.
trying
Yeah.
to do? And so,
Yes.
we
And I,
it's just such an important process of daily check-ins.
yeah.
Thankfully, I have a very supportive partner who walks alongside, and we walk alongside each other. When one of us is weak, the other one is strong, and it's just part of the process.
And what I want to highlight too is that this whole juxtaposition of your wound and your gift, that is, I mean, that is one of the most powerful concepts, Tony. I mean, I have your quote there about your greatest gift is on the other side of your wound. I speak that. I teach that to my clients. I give you credit because you came up with that. But Dad, what I want you to hear is that with Tony's wound being I wasn't seen or at least you said that's how you
Mm-hmm.
interpreted your
Yep.
family scenarios and the divorce and the splits and all that. But that now where he can still get wounded by his daughter is she doesn't see me anymore. She doesn't see me as important. She doesn't still see me as the dad that loves her so much. But yet your gift is you get to see into
Yeah.
her life in a way she doesn't even know. Because having been an adolescent girl, I can speak to this one. You don't even know what's hijacked your brain.
That's
Like
right.
this isn't even with something you're aware of or have control over. So all of these hormonal surges are beyond anything a teenage girl can be aware of, but you get to see into her process, her development with a gift that you have definitely seen God redeem, like you said, out of your story. Well, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Tony and I are going to continue this conversation about fathering leadership. We'll be right back.
Are you a dad who has ever desired a deeper connection with your daughter, but haven't known how to go about it? Let's Talk Conversation Starters for Dads and Daughters is the very resource you need. Dr. Michelle wrote it with you dads in mind. This book will support you with scripted questions, equip you to decode your daughter, and inspire you with stories of other dads and daughters. Don't wait any longer to be the hero you want to be and that your daughter needs you to be. So, to let the talking begin, head on over to drmichellewatson.com/books and order your copy today. This book will become a favorite in your fathering toolbox and will give you the answers you've been looking for. That's drmichellewatson.com/books. Now, back to the Dad Whisperer podcast.
Welcome back. I'm here today with my friend Tony Miltenberger, author of a new book titled Wisdom in the Wound, How God Uses Your Past to Shape Who You're Becoming. And we're just talking today about how your wounds influence your fathering leadership. So Tony, I got more questions for you. Here we go. So you say that a temptation often is to numb or avoid the pain altogether.
Mm-hmm.
What are some common ways that you've either heard in your pastoring or your executive coaching or even in your own life about ways that shows up and what's the cost of doing that?
Yeah, I think some of the easy ones that probably are pretty well known that have kind of are almost feel like a negative reaction to them: alcohol, pornography. Some of those things are really common coping mechanisms that we all agree aren't ideal. I think that there are some other coping mechanisms that we often ignore. Shopping is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a dad that loves to buy a bunch of toys, one of the questions I would ask you to wrestle with is, am I buying this toy because it makes our family better? Or am I buying this toy because it makes me feel better? Right. And kind of where are we leaning in on that? So shopping, toys specifically. Another one would be work. Work is one of those coping mechanisms where at work, I can feel like I'm in control. I'm on top of the world. Everyone listens to me. If you don't get that at home, sometimes we can use work as a coping mechanism. Yeah. Another one that's really is sports. And I'm a sports dad, so all my kids play sports. And sometimes I have to be careful not to worship at the idol of sports and how sportsing impacts my relationship, because the cost for coping is that we don't get to show up as ourselves in the relationships that matter most. So the cost for these coping mechanisms is sometimes intimacy. And intimacy is into me see, right? It's about creating a space and place. Karen and I often talk about what our goal is as parents. And it's a quote that we heard from Pastor Andy Stanley. Our goal is really simple. We want to create a home that our kids want to come back to.
Say it again.
We want to create a home that our kids want to come back to. That's it. And so at the end of the day, it's not about if they don't know me as a human and as their dad, if they don't know their mom, they won't come back, because you don't hang out with people you don't know.
Right.
And so if you want to hang out more with your grandkids, let them see you as parents now. Mm-hmm. Play the generational game. So Karen and I talk about this because our oldest, he's 19. He's in a very loving relationship with an incredible young woman. And we don't know what's going to happen. There's a lot of time before grandkids come into our world. And yet we talk often that we have to love her like a daughter now so that she knows who we are, so that when that time comes, she knows that she's welcome back here too.
Oh, I love that.
One of the
Okay,
things
so go
go ahead.
ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was going to say, one of the things I talk about in the book that came from that oldest child as he was becoming a young man were the idea of amnesty dinners. And amnesty dinners are these dinners where we would come together and he could share whatever he wanted without getting in trouble.
Mm.
And there was no consequence. So we heard the real stuff, like the drinking stuff or the sex stuff or any of that kind of stuff. Like we heard the real stuff because in that moment, and it was just me and him at the time, in that moment, what we were going for was not consequence, but rather it was intimacy. Is like, let's share what you're really going through and know that no matter what happens, I'm going to love you and you're not going to get in trouble.
Okay, so I've got some questions about this because I wanted to ask you about
Yeah.
amnesty dinners because it's a practical action step. So as dads are listening to our conversation, we're weaving in some action steps that a dad might say, I want to do that. So I imagine if a dad's listening, he's like, how often did you have those dinners? Who was at those dinners? Is it one child at a time so the other ones aren't being influenced by some of the struggles the older ones having? Or how did you organize that part of it?
We had them as needed. So that when he felt distant is when I would ask for one.
Got it.
And he had the opportunity to ask for them as well. He never did. I was the one that had to instigate them. And it was usually just me and him, father, son.
Okay.
And I would assume if Shiloh wanted to have one, she would probably have one with Karen. Like same gender kind of idea seems to in our house, it just seems to resonate a little bit better. It was always, the approach was always this: I'm going to tell your mom everything we talk about in this dinner, but I'll tell her after, and you won't get in trouble no matter what. And so
how do you actually do that? Like every dad, like you're saying, your stuff's getting triggered. Oh, what's this going to look like? You talked about that being seen. What's that going to look like to other people? Or, hey, I'm a pastor. People are looking to us as an example. What do you do when your son is saying, here's where I'm struggling? How do you walk with him as a father, as a leader, and not get triggered?
Use as little words as possible. So it's a lot more listening and a lot more question asking than it is talking. If I'm doing the talking in an amnesty dinner, then we've lost the point of the amnesty dinner. And I said, so for example, there was one we talked about when Connor was in his late teens. It seemed as if him and his mother were bumping heads in a really just aggressive way, a way that didn't feel good for our family, a way that I didn't like as her husband.
Yeah.
And so I called an amnesty dinner and I said, son, I need to hear more about why it feels like you're so upset with your mom.
Uh-huh.
And he was like, Dad, she's being crazy. And then he just kind of went on this rant of like all of his feelings about all of this stuff. And and so what happened is he let it out. And I'm like, okay. And then I just used a classic line that most coaches and pastors use. Tell me more about that. Right. Like, tell me more about that. And so I let him get it all out. And I said, what would it look like for your mom to approach you in a more intentional way that doesn't upset you?
Uh-huh.
And so we came up with family meetings. And so he was in the midst of applying for college. My wife is very organized. She's such a gift to our family that way. She wanted his brain to work similar to hers. And so instead, what we did is we created a shared note with all of the college tasks. And then we agreed that we were only going to talk about it once a week.
Awesome. So it was very proactive. To counter the reactive.
Yep, exactly. And
okay,
so
but let me ask you. Okay,
he knew in that moment that that's what was going to happen. And so not to bring the attitude, because that was the plan always.
Okay, so what do you do if your child, son or daughter, is saying something like, okay, it's my amnesty dinner. Hey, by the way, every weekend I'm actually telling you I'm here, but I'm here. I'm going out with my friends. And you start to say to yourself, I'm concerned that there's becoming an alcohol addiction or a drug addiction or these friends are a bad influence, but you're going, but I said you won't get in trouble and it's all okay. How do you handle that?
I think that you lean into more amnesty dinners and just know that if your child is talking to you about that stuff, they feel like they're stuck too. And so this definitely, if they're bringing it up at an amnesty dinner, one, they trust you, and
Yeah.
two, they want to know that you still love them through it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the key here is love and asking questions.
Yeah.
Like, okay, like inside I was dying, right? Inside you can die, right? And you should go talk to your friends about that, or your counselor, or your pastor. You should absolutely unload some of that emotional stress after the dialogue. But here's the thing that I see a lot of dads do is we tend to treat our kids like our friends. And when we do that, we tell them how we're feeling. Our kids aren't designed to hold our feelings. We're not on that same level, right? Like go see a counselor, go see a coach, go see, journal, do anything else other than tell your kids how you feel. In that moment, I just want you to just suck it up, Buttercup, and just hold on real tight to those feelings and ask questions so you can hear the heart of your child, right? And so, is this the life that you want? What's happening here? What makes you want to do that? Tell me more about that. And just, and then what you can do is you don't have to punish them, but what you can do is try to divert. Right. And so, hey, if they like, hey, I'm sneaking out every Friday night. Well, guess what we're doing next Friday night? Family game night. Right. We're all in it. Family game night. We're all in it together. We're all going to the lake. We're all going, you know what I mean? I'm going to try to break some patterns. So that you can see how much I love you, not as a consequence, but as an alternative to whatever it is you're choosing that makes me feel like I'm going to vomit, right? As a dad.
Yeah. And take it personal.
Right.
Like, didn't I raise you better? This is our family values. Because at 19, I started mentoring, working with youth groups. So I've spent 45 years in the trenches with teenage women. Clear this out for a minute. I kept fighting that phlegm.
Yep.
But for 45 years, yes, I'm aging myself, Tony, but I have loved teenage girls. They're just my jam. I love them in the midst of all the confusion and identity stuff that's getting impacted. And, one psychologist talks about identity versus role confusion. I'm going into the dressing room of life and trying on different roles to see which one is me. And that's normal, typical adolescent development and young adult. And so knowing that this is within normal limits, Dad, is helpful. But here's the thing. I love how you said, Tony, I have to listen more and lean in, all these L words, more than lecture.
Yeah.
And so your kid will not tell you things if they don't want the lecture, right? And so this whole idea of asking better questions is something that I have loved teaching dads too, is that in school we learned who, what, when, where, why, how. We already know that grid. So as you lean into listening, is ask a follow-up question with the key word you just heard or the last word of the sentence. If you're like, it was so long, I can't even remember what started at the beginning of that conversation. And then say like, tell me more is another one, as you just said, like, because you're thinking, who were you with? Tell me more about Ian. What is Ian like as a friend? You're asking more questions because if you tell your children, your daughter specifically, we're saying here, what to think, she won't learn how to think.
Yeah.
And then when she gets off to college, she's a prime candidate for all the influences that you don't want in her life. But under your roof, you have an opportunity here, Dad, to coach your daughter in learning how to think things through. How do you feel after you've had too much to drink? Where do you go for support? Ask more questions with who, what, when, where. I would say pull why out the most. Why tends to be a looping question. Why did you do that? I don't know. You want to teach your children how to think and process. And I think even like you said, in the amnesty dinners, that's a great way to practice being a better question asker, right? That's why even my second book, it's all about questions that you get to ask. And I once had a dad in the dads group I lead say, as I've learned to listen more, I realized the question I was going to answer wasn't even the question she was actually asking me. Like I went to a whole different place. So I think weaving together our experience, Tony, we're kind of coaching dads today with more practical action steps to connect, as you said, with the heart of your children, especially your daughter. Well, I have so many more questions I could ask you, but as we get ready to land the plane, let me just highlight a couple more things before we end. And one of them is, how do you lead without judgment? Because you said judgment impacts leadership. What can you say to dads that say, "Oh, I really do go into the judgment role even when I don't want to"?
So the thing about the judgment role is that it comes with so much shame, right? And shame doesn't often help with intimacy. They actually end up being more of a divide in that process.
Yeah.
And so I stay out of the judgment zone by saying this to myself. I know how messed up I was as a kid. and
That's good.
and so I'm not going to judge my kids for what they're going through, because at the end of the day, like, my kids are still really great kids, right? Like, and I know who I was as an adolescent, and I'm an okay adult now, right? Like, it's going to work out. So my faith helps me surrender judgment, because I know how God feels about me, and I kind of use that as a backbone to a lot of what I'm doing. It's like, man, my faith leads me in a place that says, this is what God thinks about me. I can think this way about my kids. And there's so much grace in that, right? And so one of the things I talk about in the book is the idea of curiosity and empathy. And curiosity is like those questions, and empathy is saying, I can't even imagine what it's like to be a kid today.
Yeah.
Right? To carry bullies in your pocket through your phone, the pressure. I mean, like, we didn't promposals, all of these things that people do now. We didn't do any of that. Like, we didn't, when I was growing up, we just didn't have that.
Yeah.
And so you could go to your home and never talk to a kid, like, we had landlines and all these things. And so it's through curiosity and empathy, it's easy for me to get out of judgment and just understand that, man, my kids are doing the best they can with what they have, and I'm okay and they're okay.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love that. Okay. Well, before we end, I've got to ask one more question. I always end with a go step. You've given some ideas clearly through our conversation. But in case a dad is like, whoa, I got to work on identifying my own wounds, seeing where I get triggered. And we're going to talk in our next conversation about more specificity in identifying those different kinds of wounds. But for now, what would you say to the dad listening to encourage him today to take one step forward in addressing his own wounds so that he can be a better fathering leader to his daughter?
I would say this. There's a tool that I talk about in the book. It's probably my favorite tool. It's called the emotional intensity scale. And on a scale from 1 to 10, anytime your emotional intensity spikes above a 6, it's usually more about you than it is the other person, almost always. And the reality is that 6 can look different on you than it would on me. Everyone has their own version of a 6, but you kind of know. You know that when you normally run at a 2 or 3, when you get spiked above a 6. And here's my number one piece of advice to dads out there who are listening. When you're above a 6, don't talk to your kids.
Come on. There you go.
Just put yourself in timeout.
Yep.
Put yourself in timeout and feel your feelings, because nothing good is going to come if you're at a 7, 8, 9, or 10. Just stop. You're going to damage the relationship in ways that are hard to come back from because you're emotionally reacting instead of intentionally responding. Don't be the reactionary dad, be the intentional dad. And in that intentionality, you will have generations in your home.
Come on. And where can people find you?
I'm embarrassingly easy to find at TWMilt on Instagram, wisdominthewoundbook.com, and follow the number 2 Lead podcast wherever you get your podcasts from.
I love it. Well, On Your Mark today has been how your wounds influence your fathering leadership. I've been here with my friend Tony Miltenberger, part 1 of a 2-part conversation. We invite you to come back and join us next time. You've heard lots of action steps today, dads. I trust that you'll put one of them into action today or this week. Well, this wraps up another week's program. I'm Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield, the Dad Whisperer, signing off and encouraging you to make today a day where you intentionally and consistently invest in pursuing your daughter's heart. Go Dads.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of the Dad Whisperer podcast with Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield. If you're looking for more resources to support the father-daughter relationship, Or if you want to connect personally with Dr. Michelle, you can find all the information you need at drmichellewatson.com. That's drmichellewatson.com. And remember, you can listen to the Dad Whisperer podcast anytime on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. And while you're there, we'd love for you to subscribe and leave us a review. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you again on the next edition of the Dad Whisperer podcast with Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield.